You're seeing everything? Yes. Okay. So where am I located? I work at the Frio Gallery of Art and Sackler Gallery. And I pointed out here, the building. Here's the Frio, and here is the Sackler Gallery. We're very close to the castle. We are one of the smallest museum in the whole mall, because you can see the other ones are quite huge, and it also reflects their collection. They have a larger collection. Let's see. Here, just a map of where we're located, and lucky for us, we're located next to a metro station. When you come and visit, please do let me know. I will welcome you to our museum. The Frio Gallery and the Sackler Gallery form together a one museum, which is the National Museum of Asian Art. And for National Museum of Asian Art, it really literally means that we are a museum with a collection from Japan, China, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. And we also have, if you have heard, the Peacock Room, and as well in American art collection. And the main building is the Frio Gallery. This is a recent picture where as you enter, you have these sort of like rooms all around the museum and a nice courtyard. And this was envisioned and designed by Charles Lang Freer, the founder of the Frio Gallery of Art. He was a collector of East Asian art, but he was also interested in Egyptian art. So we have this small collection of Egyptian art too. Over the years, the collection grew, but what is particular about the Frio Gallery of Art is that Freer left a note saying that none of the objects of the museum should leave the building. So we are one of those museums that we cannot loan any of the objects collected by Freer, and whatever it is, accession as objects, and that we acquire later. And we decide to leave them at the Freer. We have an interesting philosophy when collecting objects at the Freer, which is they have to really be unique pieces and outstanding pieces. So if you're interested in coming and see what we mean for outstanding, I really encourage you to come and visit when it's possible. And I also mentioned Freer was, he loved American art. So we have a collection of Whistler, and as well the Peacock Room, which was originally in his home in Detroit. And then the Peacock Room was moved, and now it's in the museum, and you can come and visit. It's a very nice room, and we open the windows once a month. So you can also see, also the windows are painted with peacocks. And when we open the windows, then you can have a sense of how it looks like during the day. We are still closed as for now, and we hope we will be able to reopen at the end of summer, hopefully August. We do have exhibition within it, but it's always exhibition that are thematic, and we mainly do exhibition on the Freer collection. Nothing external can come into this exhibition thing. So it's really limiting in terms of how we design exhibition and in this museum. And they tend to be permanent exhibitions. So these are rooms with exhibition which you can come over the years, and they will stay the same, and we do little modification to them. The other building is the Sackler Gallery. And this is the place where we do major exhibition. We have loans. We also have a collection in the Sackler Gallery, and we sort of like use this space for programs, music and performances. And again, our major exhibition is located in this building. For what regards to my expertise, I'm the curator for the Ancient Near East for the whole Smithsonian. So although I'm stationed at the National Museum of Asian Art, I cover the Ancient Near East collection that it's located in all the different units at the Smithsonian. We have 19 units plus the zoo, and we will be adding 2 more museums if you have heard in the news. So that's also exciting. For the ancient Near East, it really covers a large geographical area. The ancient Near East was a term that was used early in the 20th century, and now scholars are switching to use more ancient Middle East as a field, or as well West Asia, to be more sort of like reflect more the sort of like the region that we represent and we study. For the museum, I literally cover from Egypt to Afghanistan, and then from South Arabia up to the Caucasian area. And with this said, is that not that we have a collection that cover all these regions. We have mainly a collection of ancient Iranian objects, Yemen, Egypt, and some from Central Asia, so mainly Uzbekistan. But my role here is also to promote the entire ancient Near East as a region. So we do programs that will cover as well Armenia in archaeology, or other sort of like we do, we have an exhibition called Age Old Cities, and that wants to highlight cultural heritage in Iraq, for example, and in Syria. Let's see. The collection in the National Museum of Asian Art, you can browse it, and it's in all online. This is actually a new search platform which we launched last week. So if you have complaints, reach out to me. I'm sure there's still things that we need to fix. So just an overview, the ancient Near East collection and the Egyptian collection. The other collection for the ancient Near East is located at National Museum of Natural History. They have quite a large collection of the ancient Near East, but the issue is that it has not been photographed. So my role is really to go study the collection and also photograph the collection. And here I'm just showing you some of the objects that I've been working on. So these Anatolian idols from Turkey, and then these swords believed to be from Iran and Lebanon. And then, as you can see, and they have a quite a large ancient Egyptian collection. The other collection is coins, so 700 coins from ancient Iran. And again, these are pictures that I took because I am working on the collection, but has not been digitized. I am in the process of sort of like looking for funds to digitize this collection. Although the Smithsonian has a lot online, there's still a lot of that needs to be digitized. Since I was asked to talk a little bit on my career path, I also thought to give an idea of how I arrived where I am. I did study archaeology and conservation and preservation of cultural heritage in Italy, the University of Foscari. And there I sort of like focus on the archaeology of the ancient Near East, again, sort of like Syria and Iraq and sort of like Lebanon. Those was the regions that I was interested in terms of career path. And these are pictures of 2 stages of my career, one being a student in the field studying pottery because that is my specialty. And then the second pictures over here, now being a person in charge of an excavation. Which was one of my goals and dreams of being, conducting my own excavation in Iraq. And this is the whole team. In Italy, it works a little bit different, I believe, from the United States. We have an MA and a BA sort of career path where you already specialize as a BA person in ancient Near East. And then as soon as you are an undergrad, you participate to excavations. And you need to have at least 2-year experience of excavation in Italy. And then after you have passed these 2 years, you can finally go in the Middle East and join a proper excavation. So that was the case for me. And my first excavation in the Middle East was in Syria. So at the site of Tel Ahmar, near the Syrian and the Turkish border, and then Mara, which was very close to Aleppo. And those excavations were both run by international, sort of like a university, one from Liège and the other one from Johns Hopkins. When you, as an undergrad and as a master student, go into an excavation, that's how Italy was a big deal, and also a sort of like understanding, do I really want to continue with this field and be an archaeologist? In my case, I decided that I wanted to continue and pursue this path. Other of my colleagues left and decided to be art historians, for example, or historians. So in my field, we do distinguish this field. If you're an archaeologist, you're an anthropologist, and you go in the field. If you're an art historian, you're more focusing in understanding the art produced from these countries. And if you're an historian, you're mainly a person that studies the ancient languages, so Akkadian and Sumerian, or any other language, ancient languages from these regions. After my BA in Italy, I decided to do my PhD at the University of California in Berkeley. And that's where I still continue to do excavations in the field. And I was also given the chance to sort of like teach as a graduate student. And that's when I started to sort of like create and start my own project in Iraq. So if there's any question in terms of career path, please do stop me, as I know there's like interns that are might be interested in the ancient Near East, and I would be happy to answer any questions. There's a lot of training, a lot of trying to, apply to fellowships to support your excavation seasons outside. And as well, I really do suggest to attend conferences for the ancient Near East. That's, you get a sense of what is the field like. I wasn't trained as a museum person. I did have experience as a museum at the Walters Museum, but after I finished my PhD and applied for jobs, and I found a job at the Smithsonian, I had some experience in in the museum field, but it wasn't extensive. So as I got on my postdoc, then I finally got to know more and more what was, like the different, and so like what it entails to work in a museum. And for me, working in the Smithsonian was perfect because I could do research and go in the field and continue to be an archaeologist, but also be a curator and share my knowledge with the public. And here is sort of like what, generally speaking, what a curator does, right? But also sort of like the expectation for a curator at the Smithsonian to be, one, do research because it's a research institute, develop exhibition to share your knowledge and represent the culture that we are specialized on. We're really into producing public programs and scholarly programs. So I have been involved in really highlighting cultural heritage in Yemen and as well ancient Iran, because that's our focus as a region in our unit. We reach out to the public like everybody is doing right now in terms of COVID, and a lot of Zoom lectures, as we want to call them, a lot of social media blurbs, objects we love by curators. And I encourage you, if you want to see what we're doing, to just go to our YouTube channel where we're posting all these videos. And so there's a lot of collaboration with the social media department where they're constantly asking us for content or materials or subjects to post online. And so if you see a blurb out there, it's probably us curators writing those blurbs and whatever it is it tells for our own collection. As well as a person that works for the Ancient Near East, I am the person in charge of be the spokesperson for cultural heritage in the Ancient Near East for the Smithsonian as a large. So when I do my official trips and we do workshops, for example, in countries such as Uzbekistan, or we're now focusing in Central Asia, we go there and so like not only share our practices in terms of curator, but also so like what are we doing in terms of protection of cultural heritage. So As a whole, a curator is a researcher and spends their own time a lot researching and doing, so like being in the library and do sort of like that kind of research work, but also it's a public face and represent the institution as a whole. In terms of exhibition, I thought I'd give you an idea of what I have been involved with and I have produced since I arrived in 2018. And one of our exhibition is again highlighting our ancient Iran collection. And our collection is mainly dated to the first centuries of the Common Era, so 250 to 650, so the Sasanian period. So this is a sort of like our best in our museum. It's a collection of silverware from ancient Iran. And the exhibition is called Feast Your Eyes, not only in terms of feasting your eyes and seeing the metalwork that we have in our collection, like in this case of this drinking vessel in silver, but also the fact that it's or part of a banqueting, so like practices of the ancient Near East. So drinking wine and banqueting and gathering together. But it also reflects the empire, the Sasanian Empire during that time period. Another exhibition that I have been involved with is A Glimpse of Ancient Yemen. We have a collection of pieces of ancient Yemen that derive from an excavation from Van de Phillips in the area of Marib. And we have objects that come from an archaeological context. This is another thing to consider for our collection, that very often museum collection will come without a provenance. So we don't know where the archaeological context. And difference, this Yemen collection, we know exactly where it comes from, where it was excavated, where it was meant to be, or what was its function, just because we know that it was actually excavated and we know it comes from a house, for example, or we know from the inscription who it belonged to. The exhibition was really meant to give highlighting ancient Yemen cultural heritage and talk about what was going on in Yemen. And in combination with the ancient Yemen exhibition, we also did a program that highlights the problems in ancient Yemen in preserving cultural heritage in Yemen, possible workshops that we are planning to do. And there was a plan to do a workshop of preservation of cultural heritage with scholars from Yemen. The workshop was going to be in Jordan to allow our colleagues in Yemen to travel in Jordan, then learn about how to protect their artifacts, because they're being, destroyed by the civil war happening in the country. And what are the first thing that one can do to protect collections in museums? So with these exhibitions, I think Curator do have a powerful tool to talk about larger issues, and especially for the ancient Near East, to talk about the necessity of protection of cultural heritage, but also reaching out to our local colleagues in Yemen, for example, or in Iraq, where we're also running a training program for local archaeologists in Iraq, so they can preserve and document their cultural heritage. And this is another view of the exhibition. The exhibition was just made of five pieces, and it was really small, but meant to be really highlighting this ancient culture, which often we don't hear about. We often hear about, right, other countries in the Middle East, but less of what's going on in Yemen. So that was the main purpose of this exhibition. So these are the two main exhibitions, but we also do online exhibitions. And I thought of switching. Let me see if I can switch and then show you our online exhibition. This is an exhibition that focuses on the Central Asian culture of the Soviets. It was done in collaboration with several institutions. It is an online exhibition, but it also has a lot of content. So very often people calls it as a resource, right, on the Sogdians. This very often less spoken culture of Central Asia. It's quite dynamic, and we collaborated with the Hermitage in Russia, as well with the French Institute for the Study of the Afrasiab, which is a site in Uzbekistan, NYU and BART Graduate Center. And this is a very dynamic, so like online exhibition. And so like you can explore a little bit of the different, so like aspect of the culture of the Sogdians. And we worked on having sort of like interactive maps where you can learn a bit of the site, the archaeological site, and then where it is located, and then on to say the objects that are linked to this archaeological site. So there's a lot of content here, and we went to Uzbekistan and also show them this online exhibition, and we have collaborated with some of them. And so in the future, we are hoping to expand more this online to include more our colleagues from Uzbekistan. And it really gives you an overview and say, as it was an exhibition, we have selected 25 objects that you can explore as if you were attending a real exhibition. It was meant to be a physical exhibition, but the time when we wanted to do that was when the US and Russia had issues. And so we couldn't, there was an embargo with the bringing over right objects over from Russia would have been very difficult, and the end result was to do a digital an online exhibition. Gonna go back to this, and please do stop me if you do have questions. Let's see if this works. Okay. In terms of research, I did mention that I do a lot of research on the collection in terms of provenance, identifying objects, and I am in the field. In terms of collection, we or have been working on a collection of objects called seals. These are like little seals of 1 or 2 centimeters, and that were used in the ancient East to sort of like seal contracts or seal goods. And it was sort of like rolled over or stamped over clay, and the jar was, you know, closed with clay and wrapped with a rope. Or the tablet would have had an internal tablet. That's a clay surface where you would have cuneiform inscription with the contract between 2 people, and then run it over with a seal. And if the jar is broken or the tablet is broken, then you know that somebody tampered the content or the contract. So these ancient tools are still now in some form, I think, used, but they're quite fascinating. They tell you about the economic practices over the time period, as well as ritual and that were, you know, represented during that time period as well. The iconography is quite rich. They were used for almost 6,000 years. And it gives you an idea of how the iconography and the style change over time period. So this was really meant to be for the general public. So there's general information about what they are, what are the seals. We also attempted to, there's a section on the about, what the seals are, the objects, their high resolution images, essays from scholars to talk about some seals from specific regions, maps and archival material, as well activity for kids. These are the seals, and again, they're 1 to 2 centimeters big, so they're quite small. Here are images, how they will look like. One of the major challenges is sometimes in museum you have one image of the front, but you don't have the other sides. And so for me, it was very important to work with the photographer and say, I need the images of all the sides, because people need to see the complexity of the object from all the sides, and then roll it over a artificial clay so you can read the theme that is represented on these seals. and also using image mapping to sort of like tell what is this object or what is this this motif on a seal. And so when you hover over, you can have more about what is the seal about, or what is the iconography about. In this case, is an altar representing a very stylized form. Maps are essential, I think, when talking for the ancient East, to give you an idea of the extent of the region. And so we mapped some of the seals to sort of like, if you hover over Iran and Iraq, then you get what are the seals produced in the regions, or say, what are the styles associated to the region. And then the rest is my work in the Qara Dagh Regional Archaeological Project. We do have a website that we develop mainly to share our information with colleagues in Iraq, but also with scholars in my field. It has been a common practice to just sort of like produce a website to let people know where we are up to, and as well to acknowledge the people that are working with us, the local community. This is more of a lengthy section of this presentation, and I'm happy to stop here for questions, or I can just show you more what we're doing in Iraq. Should I continue with what we're doing in Iraq, or do you have questions where I can stop and sort of like answer those questions? Should I continue and just, okay. So the project that I'm running in Iraq Kurdistan is it was a 5-year project that I had with the colleagues in the region of Suleymaniye. Suleymaniye is the modern city of the Kurdistan region of Iraq. So we have the main city, which is Erbil, and then the second major city is Suleymaniye. This is a valley, and going back, literally, as you're seeing, this is part of the valley. Very often when we think about Iraq, it's, at least when I speak with people, they always think it's a dry environment, and it is not. I mean, it's quite diverse, and the environment it's different, shifting from the south to the north, to the east and the west. So I mainly work in this region where it's very close to the Iranian border, but it's also part of the so-known Zagros Mountains. And it's a valley that has this very interesting formation, mountain formation, with peaks and gorges in each of these peaks. So it's quite beautiful when you go in the spring, and quite hot in the summer. That's the time period when we go, is usually June and July. And over the year, we have noticed that there's been a spike in the level of heat during the summer. So our season are quite short also for that reason. But it's also the time when I can leave the museum and do research in the field. So my team members need to bear with me for the heat that, of the summer. But it's quite stunning in terms of landscape. When I started this project, I had a 5-year contract, which we will be renewing for the next 5 years. And we were asked to help the antiquities department in the region to survey the entire area. And for survey, we would really do a research of the satellite images available of the region. And after identifying archaeological site, we will go on the ground and then drive around and identify those sites that we saw on satellite images, and also old maps from the 1940s done by the Iraqis, and so like compare notes. And it was also a process of talking with local communities and villages to tell us about if they knew about ancient archaeological site. And that was an important process to really talk with the local community, and they have helped us to identify some of the sites. As one travels and, in these regions, there's the one way is definitely by, flying in, but I was lucky to capture this image from my airplane, which is the area where actually I work. So this is already June, so the landscape a little bit more dry. But in order to reach the archaeological site, one needs to go through this it's like snaky like route that leads into the valley. And so we work near this village called Tiledzeit. This is the archaeological site, and we call them mounds or a tell. It literally means a mound where there's a occupation, human occupation that goes back to 8,000 years ago, and already the years and millennia, this has accumulated and has formed this mound. So we call it human-made mounds. Which I know there's also in the US, like human-made mounds, archaeological mounds. So we're here in the top, and it's quite an extensive archaeological site, but not as big as maybe you have heard of some archaeological site in southern Mesopotamia, like or Babylon. This is really a rural site. It's less than 1 hectare, and the survey has helped to identify the different archaeological occupation of the mound. And so based on our excavations and the study mainly of the ceramics, we had identified at least 3 occupation periods. And as we continue, we think we have older periods. And so we call these periods as early 3rd millennium. So we're talking about more or less of 5,000 years ago, and then you go back to 6,000, 7,000, and 8,000 years ago. So we have very old levels. So from the top, the earlier periods, and then going down, you get the older periods. The idea of doing these cuts on the mound, it's really to get to know the stratigraphy, so the archaeological level and occupation of the mound. And the only way to do it is to really cut big trenches on the side of the mound. And then when we decide that this is enough in terms of knowing the chronology, we go up and then we start extensive archaeological excavations. And these are some of the things that we find, so like old ovens, pots, and sherds. A lot is due to a lot of our understanding of the ancient culture is the study of broken sherds. And this is how it looks like. We spend our summers drawing pottery and studying the pottery. And based on, say, these bases, we can understand that this is a specific time period that was produced during that specific, that area and that specific time. We also find several, objects, and this is very interesting because we are located in Iraq, but we also find things that are imported. So already at an earlier stage, say of 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, we have imports from Turkey, like this stone figurine, which is usually produced in northern Anatolia. But it's also found in other regions, as an example, but the closest examples are those found in Turkey. So we're thinking that this is an import or somebody traveling from Turkey to northern Iraq. Geographically is not so distant, but still, if we consider the time period, because we're talking about 5,000 years ago, it's really impressive of how people would move from one region to the other one. And at that time period, wheel chariots was less of a technology well known, so maybe by foot or other means. We also have seal impressions. I'm obsessed with seals. I'll show you a little bit what it looks like of these seals in this catalog that we have. And what happens is that in archaeological excavation, you don't find the actual seal. You often find the seals in private collection. Those are because they're made of shiny stone. They're easy to be taken away and by the antiquities market. What we're left over is the impression. I mentioned to you that you impress it on a clay, on a lump of clay, this is the case, or on a pot, and you get the motifs on the sides. And these motifs are something that we read and we can understand and say, this belongs to a specific period. This is on the top, a banquet scene where we have 2 people drinking from a vessel, and we know that that vessel was used for beer because the production of beer was quite known in that region. On the back, we have the impression of the textile. So this is how we know that it belonged to a jar that was enclosed by a textile and then a rope. And then the seal impression was done on this lump of clay to seal the content of the jar. We are doing a lot of drone images, and here's me trying to collate all the images, but this is how it looks like from the top in the different branch that we're doing, trying to identify buildings and structure that are linked to specific activities. In this particular area, we know that this was an area for bread production because of a series of ovens usually used for the production of bread. And as well, there's a lot of, you don't see it here, but it's tons of pottery, and possibly there's a workshop for the production of pottery. And then we had an interesting building here where we had pottery like animal figurines, spindles, usually used for textile, or clay wheels that are usually used for toys that are attached to one so like a toy then would then have these clay wheels to be attached on the sides. Then going earlier, what was very interesting is that we found a lot of these pots that are known as bevel ring bowls, and these were used for ratio to pay individuals for, I don't know, for the construction of a temple or for the producing bread. They're quite unique in the sense that they identify a specific time period, and these were used throughout the entire region of Iraq, Iran, and Anatolia. And they're always the same shape, they're always the same sort of like size. There's differences from one and the other one, but these are unique, and helping us to identify this is a specific period where there was a lot of interaction going on between the different ancient cultures of this extensive region. So we're talking about people using the same type of pot, not only in Iraq, in Turkey, in Iran, in Syria, and other regions further north. So it's quite impressive for the time period that we're talking. And here we're going a little bit earlier in time. We're talking about already 6,000 years ago. And we have burials, tools that tells us that they were producing for food production, and as well lithics in situ. And we try to understand the stratigraphy. Something happened with a collapse and burned area of the region, and as well burials that were built, buried within this mound. And we have found a burial from the Parthian period, a little bit later in time period, but they really digged into and put this person within a jar. So now we're trying to understand the individual and as well any disease that this person had. We didn't find a frontal face, which is a pity because we wanted to do more of a study of, what were they eating during that time period based on the teeth. But strange enough, we didn't have the frontal face. We found seeds, which were very important to identify chronology and do C14. And so this is some of our next steps, really do more of chronology analysis. And then again, we have a lot of pottery. These are earlier periods, and pottery becomes a little bit more simpler in terms of how it is produced. The wheel, how to do the pottery done on wheel comes a little bit later, but there's still some indication that it's happening during this time period. And now we're really talking about earlier periods and going back in time. And we're talking about 6,500 years back from today. And some tools like seals, tokens, again, spindles. So all objects that are common during this time period, but really allows us to understand what's going on in the region. And recently we have done a lot of research on the obsidian. This is imported material, again, like the figurine from Anatolia. And my colleague in the UK made some scientific analysis, and we can identify from obsidian where it comes exactly. So we identified that one comes from this area in Menrut Dagh and another one from Maidan Dagh. And so this is quite exciting for us because, again, we're talking about a large geographical area from Anatolia down to Iraq, and the import of raw material to this little mound and this rural mound in northern Iraq. So our research is still ongoing, and we hope we can go back again next year. I wouldn't say this year, of course, but there's a lot to be done, and we're hoping to find more material that can allow us to understand this region as a whole. And I think I have spoken a lot, and I will give you a chance to ask questions. So I will stop sharing my screen, and I welcome any questions.